We welcome all the panelists to the session, and we have Mr. Vijay Thadani who will be chairing the session. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Good afternoon now. Good to be back here again with you. I attended the previous session on healthcare and really very exciting and exciting opportunities. This session is on social inclusion and upliftment using digital technologies. I'm just relating it to what we discussed in the inaugural session. We said if the coverage of digital transformation gets isolated to a few businesses or a few sections of society, then we would not get the benefits that digital transformation is supposed to deliver. And the issue is not that we must be fair to all, which obviously is true. But in addition to that, we have to remember that unless the rest of the society is completely aligned and also digitally empowered as much as the rest of us who are fortunate to have the access, we would not derive the full benefits. And then that dream of Atmanirbhar Bharat will remain a distant reality. So to discuss this, I have four eminent panelists. I have a representative from the government, which is the voice of the policy, and also in social sectors, typically state plays a major role, and therefore it would be very important to see how the government policy is shaping up. The second, digital transformation has to reach the furthest away places. We need access to technology and technology availability. And we have another very eminent panelist from technology. The third is its implementation is done by not-for-profit foundations. And in this case, we have the world famous Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation represented here. So that is the third panelist. And the fourth is the corporate sector over the last many years, but much more in the last decade or so, has played a very important role through corporate social responsibility initiatives. So these are the four panelists that who are going to talk about. I just want to say one thing. Digital inclusion for the social sector typically means that, first of all, as an individual, we used to first say roti kapda makan. From there we moved to bijli pani sadak, and now I think bijli pani sadak or internet. These four accesses are important because digital is as essential a service as electricity, water, or the road connecting us. And if there was a proof required, we couldn't have got a better proof than we got in the last 6 months. There are 2 points of view. The whole digital journey in the last 6 months has resulted in some people believe that the divide has increased. I come from, and I'm not disagreeing with that, but I also come from looking at the fullness of the glass rather than the emptiness of the glass. And to me, the glass half full is, in many ways, the divide has disappeared. And I'll give you examples of one from the place where I come from, which is education. While it is true that all students are able to learn using digital technologies, the students in the villages with poor connectivity and just a mobile phone, which is just a feature phone, not even a smartphone, are having to grapple with their learning continuity, and therefore the divide has increased. But the reverse way of saying that is, wherever you are, you have access to the best teacher. You have the access to the best teacher, so you don't have to worry about which college or school did I go to. Is that the best school or it is not the best school? The digital technologies have made sure that we have a level playing field and availability to all. So there are, of course, both sides of the coin. Same thing for work from home. work from home in many ways had slowed us down. But now organizations are realizing that work from home actually is a blessing in disguise. It has enabled us to become much, much more productive. And the positive of work from home and how it is addressing the divide is that when you're working from home, you can be coming from a disadvantaged or a differently able part of the society, and you would have equal access and you would be able to participate equally well. So I think these are some of the issues of whether the divide exists or not, and how do we handle the divide that we have this very able panel which will discuss these matters. So as usual, I will first start with the government policy, because we must hear how is the policy shaping up, what are the initiatives government is doing. And I must say government has a number of initiatives. It's difficult to keep a track of the number of initiatives, and I think Mr. Nagar, who's the Joint Secretary, Ministry of Panchayati Raj, Government of India, he will take us through the journey of some of the recent initiatives. And then, of course, he would be able to answer most of our questions when we meet next. So with that, I hand you over to Mr. Nagar. We organized this special session for you today, sir. It's your special day, and we thought this is the best time for you to be with us as well. So over to you, Mr. Nagar.
So thank you very much. And thank you for having me on this panel, giving me the opportunity to share with you. So just to give you a brief about what we do here in the Panchayat Raj Ministry, it is our job to encourage panchayats to plan for their resources, and social justice is among the first items of our charter. Since the time the constitutional amendment was made, it has been our constant endeavor through this ministry to bring panchayats to the forefront and to help them realize the vision of actually being the third tier of the government. So this title of my slide, Drivers for Rural Transformation, this actually comes from the previous year when we set about envisioning our role for the next few years. And next slide, please. So this is the vision. There are 29 focus areas that are mapped onto the Gram Panchayats. These 29 sectors, which I would be talking about in the next slide, they map across various departments. And so the first job is to build the capacity of our elected representatives. Nearly 45% of the total Panchayat elected representatives, which are of the order of about 30 lakhs, these are women. A lot of our states have a 50% reservation for women, and a lot of states that do not, even there the number is much higher than the reserved 33%, which is how we get close to 45%. So the first being the capacity building of panchayat elected representatives. The second item, which was strategic really, that we need to convert our Gram Panchayat Bhavans, which is the building of the Gram Panchayat. We are still short by about 25,000 out there, out of the 2.5 lakh panchayats in the country. But we need to convert them into hubs of activity so that that's your usual go-to place for various kinds of services, for government-related issues and all that. Then smart governance, BharatNet is in the process of providing connectivity to all our Gram Panchayats. They are looking to do it over the next year or so. They've already covered or made service ready about 1.35 lakh Gram Panchayats, and the OFC cable laying is something that is being actively pursued. So that would enable this smart service delivery and everything that goes with it. Provision of online government services in GPs would be enabled once we have this connectivity and we have the systems in place. And then panchayat, there are so many departments, each having their own agenda and their own system in which to pursue things. So we try and promote the concept of one panchayat, one holistic plan. Next slide. These are the sectors in the middle that you see. It's a pretty cluttered list, but the first item there is social welfare, and somewhere you can also read women and child development. There is if it were our only policy thrust to have social justice on our agenda, then I would be in the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. That is how we work. But being in Panchayat, we find that we have to deal with all these 18 ministries and departments on which these 29 focus areas map. I'm telling you the schematic strategy that we have of going about doing what is the central theme of the talk today. Next slide, please. So, e-governance is something that we try and promote, and we've been doing it since 2007, really. Panchayats are the recipients of devolution funds that go to them directly from the Ministry of Finance. It is something that is determined by the Finance Commission. So in the 14th Finance Commission period that ended last year, a total of nearly 2 lakh crores was apportioned for the Gram Panchayats, only the Gram Panchayats, and all this money went to them. It was weighed according to the population of each Gram Panchayat and its size, mainly the population. 90% of the weight was that of the population. You found that almost 500 rupees per person was the money that went to a panchayat in a year. So panchayats need to plan for this. This is untied funds, and it was our endeavor through all these systems to induce them to plan for these funds, to account for them, and to try and cover our main agenda of social justice through the planning process by means of nudges, by means of systemic provisions in our Plan Plus tool, and so on. So that is a general. If it's transparent, then it's good for everybody, and so it'll also be good for social justice kind of an agenda. We are heavily into the capacity building. I've already said that. We provide an interface to the Gram Panchayats and other two tiers of Panchayat as well, with the district and the block Panchayats. With the technological advances that are happening, we also have a small provision for economic development where we try and reach out to some of these communities directly, only through the state government. It is a state subject. And Swamitva is a new scheme that I'll talk about right at the end of our talk. Next slide. So, e-Gram Swaraj, we can go to the next slide. So this is the Gram Swaraj architecture. So initially there is a profile of the panchayat, and the second one of the boxes in the first row is where people sit together and plan for the funds that have been allocated to them. This is currently going on. We run a campaign every year from the 2nd of October up till December. This year we are having it till January because the time that we'll need is more in view of the COVID restrictions. So rather than have a Gram Sabha meeting, we would be encouraging people to meet in ward sabhas, in Mahila sabhas, in Bal sabhas, and so on, so that all these people are covered, and then they can all provide their inputs into the Gram Panchayat development plan. Having planned for their activities, they now have to track its progress. There is another module delegated to that. They have to account for those funds. So the endeavor is to encourage panchayats to not just plan for the Finance Commission funds. In the current year, that is of the order of 60,000 crores to not just the Gram Panchayats, but also the district and block panchayats. This is something that is new to the 15th Finance Commission, which is currently in force. So people account for it, and then once the job is completed, it goes into the asset directory. If you see the second row, the last one of those boxes is PFMS. So the endeavor is to get all the panchayats to make their payments through the gateway, the PFMS gateway, and I'm happy to tell you that nearly 1.6 lakh panchayats have already got their digital signing certificates registered. If you see the small print underneath that, nearly 27,000 crore worth payments have been made in nearly 1 lakh GPs already. since the time we started this. All assets have to be geotagged, that is the middle box. And then we have an instrument for spatial planning called Gram Manchitra that we are trying to introduce more and more so that people have a sense of what is happening where. The lowermost belt, the local government directory, is like an Aadhaar code for revenue entities in the country, which is something that we need to do so that there is interoperability of data. Next slide, please. So Rashtriya Gram Swaraj Abhiyan is our main scheme. We are in the business of capacity building. It's a state subject, so you can tell people how to go about their business, but then actually going about their business is something that the state has to monitor. It's an umbrella scheme. We are in the penultimate year. It's a centrally sponsored scheme, and we cover all the states and union territories. All the states. But yeah, union territories, it is a capacity building fund, so everyone's welcome to the party. Next slide. These are the focus areas. I don't need to go into them in greater detail. I see that my clock is ticking. Next slide, please. So I also mentioned that we provide an interface with the technologies. So there is the principal scientific advisor under him. There is, of course, the NRSA and the RUTAG, the Rural Technology Action Group, who have a basket of technologies, tested ones of the order of about 1100 that they've already made. So we provide this interface. Our main implementation arm in the job of capacity building would be the National Institute of Rural Development and the various state institutes of rural development. There are also some states that have a separate Panchayat Raj Institute of Training. So through these, we reach out to the panchayats and try and help them identify the technology that is apposite and then adopt it, and we try and find the means for that. If we can't do it through our scheme, we try and converge the groups, the other schemes, small push cards and various other things. Spatial planning for some selected gram panchayats is also a couple of things that we are currently under. Next slide, please. So there are also these small inputs as a part of the RGSA scheme, where an area where the state government feels and the local district and gram panchayat feels that some money infusion is needed for the mainly the conversion of the social capital into a working business model through which people could generate meaningful work for themselves and earn some money in the bargain. So we do a lot of that. I will not go into detail. Maybe for Q&A, I could supplement this information. Next slide, please. Yeah, so Swamitva. So in our country, while the agricultural lands have been surveyed, mapped, delimited, a number of times one hears about the Todermal and then the British came. A lot of the terminology has been the same. I used to be so amused. I'm from the Forest Service, and when a property paper said Mehkama Janglat Mehfooza Mehduda, it used to knock me out completely. But then it's a fact that in all these years, the rural Abadi areas where people live, the residential areas have never been mapped. So this is what we are looking to do through this scheme now. It provides an integrated property validation solution for rural India. Why are Panchayat Raj people doing it? Because the Department of Land Resources says that they're mainly concerned with the agricultural land. So if it's non-agricultural land and if it's Abadi, then it would be within the mandate of the Panchayats. So that would provide, this paper would provide the person with the means to leverage their property as a financial asset. There would be accurate land records. There would be a system of updating all these records. Property tax is in a state like Maharashtra, some panchayats close to Pune earn as much as 1 crore of rupees in a year just for this. So Swamitva would provide a basis for the calculation and appropriation of this tax. Next slide, please. So it would also create a survey infrastructure. And this is the scheme type. This is how we convert pictures into land parcels. These are the various components. We started it off as a pilot. So next slide, there are only certain states that are being covered in the current year. But while we're doing it, we are also in the process of, so those things that you see in the blue band right at the bottom, these are the states we are doing currently. But if you've been following the Honorable Prime Minister's programs, on 11th October, he announced that we need to roll it out quicker than we had originally intended. So we are in the process of turning it into a full scheme so that all the country's rural residential assets are fully mapped and ready in about 3 years' time. So thank you.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Mr. Nagar. We should have allocated you more time. I think your subject is extremely interesting, but I'm sure we'll get some time in the question answer. Just to be mindful of the time we have totally ahead of us, I will not break for any question right now, but maybe take all the questions in the end. So I would now like to introduce Ms. Sheenam Ori, who's the Vice President, Digital Services and APJ CIO leader of Dell Technologies. She also serves as the chairperson for the Women in Action and Family Balance Employee Resource Groups at Dell India and APJC. I would skip that long, very interesting introduction because of a shortage of time, but I am sure the rest will be visible in your presentation, Sheenam.
Thank you so much. Okay, we can move to the next slide, Colonel. So, ladies and gentlemen, a very, very warm welcome. Honored to be here, and really honored to represent Dell Technologies here. I do want to talk about Dell's purpose, right? And we have defined our purpose to actually drive human progress. It aligns so really well with our current topic. At Dell, we're constantly asking the question, how can we, along with our customers, our partners, and our suppliers, have a profound and positive impact on the society and the planet? And that is why in November last year, we launched something called Progress Made Real, which talks about very, very quantitative goals that we want to achieve at the end of 2030. So in the next decade or so, what is it that we would want to do? And if we can move to the next slide, please. So Progress Made Real is really focused on three really big initiatives. How does one advance sustainability? How do you cultivate inclusivity? And how does one transform lives, really? Right? And at the bottom of all of that is really how do we keep to operate in by principles of ethics and principles of data privacy. Real inclusion, when we talk about real inclusion, it really happens with a purpose. When you attract, develop, and retain diverse talent, and you engage them, how do you do all of that is really very, very important. And it's at the core of our values for us. We believe diversity across our leadership team increases our ability really to be innovative and ensures that our company decisions reflect a wide array of perspectives. To drive this, our 2030 moonshot goals are around these three pillars that you're seeing over here. And it's also to increase, one of the things that we want to do is increase diversity in our workforce. 50% of our talent should be diverse and 40% of our leadership to be diverse. Key levers to do this is really to scale our initiatives for maximum social impact. And that is what drives Dell Technologies. Next slide, please. So if you look at the various things that we are doing, one of the major focuses that we are trying to do is trying to increase our focus of technology in the education field. 65% of the children entering primary school will find themselves in occupations that do not exist today. This is something that the World Economic Forum has published. Future of work will also lay an increased premium on digital skills and social and emotional skills, which are quickly transferable and expandable. Therefore, while we need to drive STEM, and we are doing that, we need to add an A into it, right? STEM has to really become STEAM, with the integration of arts to harness demographic dividends. Social inclusion for us is not only about bringing those left behind in the loop, but also to continuously invest in upgrading the skills of our existing workforce and of the existing ecosystem for the future. And while technology is really integrated with this new teaching and learning practices, students are also empowered to inquire, innovate, and collaborate in highly personalized ways. We have partnered with the Atal Innovation Mission, Niti Aayog, to help millions of children in India to develop their social innovation skills. We are also upskilling the workforce of tomorrow through our employability skills programs, not just us, but around us. So how do these programs really focus on social inclusion? Through our variety of CSR programs, we create safe spaces where students can come and learn. Innovation programs can focus on providing mentorship and internship opportunities to those young minds, and we do that at large scale. Researchers show us, okay, and I think all of us are aware of this, that a male child in India is today more likely to get education, access to a device than his female counterpart. We are committed to closing this diverse gap. 50% of our beneficiaries, more than actually 50% of our beneficiaries across all our CSR programs are girl students. These gaps, if not addressed today, and we believe in this, also creep into our workforce and can tilt the balance. So therefore, if we have to move towards those 2030 moonshot goals, we need to invest in STEM and STEAM for our girl children today so that we can create the future workforce. Can we move to the next slide, please? This is an example of what we did, right? And we have partnered here with Tata Trust. So we are the technology partners and Tata Trust is a implementation partner. We partnered with Tata Trust and the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare in 2017, and the partnership continues right now. We've developed a nationwide healthcare digital system to manage non-communicable diseases under the umbrella of Ayushman Bharat. This program focuses on preventive screening of 500 million people with a population over the age of 30, and it concentrates on hypertension, diabetes, and common cancers. Some details more about this, right? So Digital Life Care is the program that we talk about, is a suite of mobile and web apps on a cloud platform to support the delivery of the NCD health services and enables COVID continuum of care. The health record of every individual is actually maintained. It equips the ASHA workers and the ANM workers with trainings and apps for health screening and data inputs. It has web portals for doctors at the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels, as admin portals and dashboards for all health officials. This system actually guides the users on diagnosis, treatment, and referrals at a primary level. It also has smart alerts. It has reminders, drill down dashboards, so data, transparency of data is taken care of. It has provisions for e-referrals, drug stock management, and patient monitoring across facilities. It is deployed on the government cloud and set up for horizontal and vertical scaling and ensures high availability and performance through clustered architecture. We have a dedicated group of people who are actually doing this under our Progress Made Real umbrella and supporting the government in making this happen. An excellent example of how technology can be leveraged and used in healthcare. Can we move to the next slide, please? Another very good example, and this is something that we've done as a stretch assignment for our employees. We took up an initiative last year to see, we do a lot of CSR within the organization groups itself and the employee groups itself. We go out, volunteer, buy stuff for people, give time, paint schools and stuff like that. We thought we're a technology company. Can we, as employees, do something leveraging technologies? And thereby came this idea. So we have actually leveraged technology to convert textbooks into Braille, right? And in the phase 1 of this, we're working with Mitra Jyoti, and that's now in the testing phase. Mitra Jyoti is a school for visually impaired people in Bangalore. We have then now added Daisy Foundation, which is another such institute for visually impaired people in Bangalore. And our North Star is to make this pan-India, right? So how do we actually bring books out in Braille from normal textbooks? And what we have been able to do is actually reduce a textbook conversion, which used to traditionally take about 11 days to less than 3 days. And, most of that goes into proofreading and stuff like that. The technology is able to do its work in about 4 to 5 hours. The other thing that we did for blind, and this was the second initiative which we started to take up for visually impaired people, was to develop a visually based app, again in partnership with Mitra Jyoti. And this app actually helps the visually impaired people easily navigate to a specific location. So if you're in a large office and you don't know how to get there, and you come in possibly for an interview, right, and you're told, go to second floor, this conference room, how does a mobile app help you get there, right? Our North Star for this is actually to get it into public spaces like offices, cafeterias, malls, etc. And that's really another example of how technology, in a very small way, stretched assignments for employees can really help social inclusion. If we can move to my last slide, please. Thank you. Technology, in our opinion, is a huge enabler for anything that we would want to do in the social impact stage. We're talking about variety of technologies today, right? We're talking multi-cloud, we talk edge, we talk 5G, we're talking AI, ML, we're talking security, we're talking data management. All of this can be leveraged beautifully, either singly or in a combined effort to make social impact much higher in our country. And we really strongly believe that. And as I conclude, some use cases that I would leave for the panel is access to content, right? Resources, enabling learning, anytime, anywhere. A very classic example of how you can, manage multi-cloud and edge, and how can you leverage data management and data security across this is something that we can definitely do and put into place here. The role of technology in driving high quality translations to reduce, the language barriers, right? Most of the translations that we see are either in English or in Hindi. How do we use NLP really to get to, the variety of languages that we have in our country and variety of languages that people speak because they don't speak English and Hindi? How do we get education to them? Just through tele-innovations, right? And this is something that's very relevant in today's day and time with the pandemic. How do you increase the quality of education and the quality of healthcare by ensuring that you have a huge database and the ability to integrate various data sets into something that we can reach better education, better healthcare to the most rural parts in our country. I've spoken about this already. Data protection, data management, security are going to be very, very critical considerations. And we at Dell believe that the next 10 years is going to be really the data decade across the globe. If the government, if the industries and the organizations in India come together, I'm sure we can do a lot of stuff using things like AI, ML, cloud, and data for the country in this sector. And with that, I bring it back to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Sheenam. This was very exciting. I think it is one of the better kept secrets. The Dell initiatives, at least for most of us who are attending this, would definitely like to understand more, and maybe CDT can partner with you. And many of us associate with other organizations as well.
That would be awesome.
Thank you. I will now move on to the third panelist, and I'll just request everybody to please stick to your time because now we are exactly halfway through and we have two more to go and we do want to ask questions, allow people to ask questions. So I have Mr. Arjun Venkatraman, Program Officer Digital from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He is a program officer with the digital team, and I think the work span that this impacts is digital health, livelihoods, and gender, amongst others. So, without further ado, I will ask Arjun to please present his thoughts. And if he can keep it to 7 minutes, it will be wonderful, Arjun. Thank you.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for inviting me and having me as a part of this panel. So I think with the foundation having been in India for a while now, we've had the privilege of being both an observer and a participant in some of the digital journey so far, and we hope to continue to be a part of it going forward. And I think and obviously try and keep this brief. I'm not using slides. I'll focus a little bit in the initial part about some of the great work that's been going on in the country. And then I'd like to keep the second half of it just to outline some of the sort of challenges that we see ahead. And because development ultimately is an ongoing process, and there's always room to do better and do better for more people. So I'll just start off with a few insights. I think in the most startling thing about India is that it's one of the most visionary and progressive countries with regard to digital ecosystems. We're now seeing, there's an ongoing conversation in the public space around national open digital ecosystems. And this is, this journey started out in some ways with the Aadhaar initiative. And then after that, we saw the UPI. And now we're currently seeing the rollout of the National Digital Health Mission. And there are other similar ones being planned, in the agricultural as well as the education space. This is one of the sort of defining factors of the Indian journey, where we've taken this approach of public goods versus tech development for private gain. And I think that really sets India apart from others, and we're almost being looked at as the go-to people for how do you solve societal problems at scale. Now with the Ocean or the Open credit network that's being launched based on the consent framework that's been put out by the DEPA, I think we'll now see financial services becoming available more and more for the most vulnerable sections of the population. And there's also already this flavor of viewing things from the lens of justice and what's appropriate. We're looking at flow-based credit rather than asset or collateral-based credit in those schemes. So I think these are some of the most visionary and progressive things that India is doing in the national level. At the state level as well, we've seen some phenomenal innovation. Particularly in the area of reaching out to the last mile and actually reaching out to people who may not have the best access to technology. So we've seen the Kilkari program. It's reached 18 million people with content and behavior change content around maternal health, child health, nutrition, and so forth. Similar efforts have happened at the state level. So we've had Bihar work with Mobile Vani, where they're actually using community members to listen to user-generated content and then respond to it. We also have more recent example during the pandemic, the stellar work that the UP government has done in leveraging the most cutting-edge tools in the pandemic response and actually meeting the challenges of the current time. So I think these are very positive for the future. We see there's great work that's being done in the space of emerging technologies like AI, machine learning, and NLP, among others. Very recently, we saw the RAISE event that the METI had organized. And some of the presentations there, for me, were very eye-opening. It was great to see young innovators in the country doing work which is sort of seminal. It's path-breaking, and it's all being done in country. And I think the vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat is going to be realized through this kind of youth-led innovation in some of these, very these are fields that have been very difficult for people to break into. So it's really great to see so much good innovation. On the same lines, organizations like Vadhvani AI have been doing some very, very fundamental research in the area of anthropometry. So, you can now actually do a 10-second video of a child and build a model that tells you whether the child is is malnourished, or whether they're meeting their growth parameters. These are kind of things that will actually allow us to collect this information at scale, make good decisions. It allows the government and the administration to make good decisions about what to do with this kind of data. I think, as Mr. Naga pointed out, that is really the source of good decision making. Without good data, you really can't get to that state. While all of these this is the sort of the rosy positive side of the story. I think the other side, which is the road ahead. Some of the challenges that we've seen, one is of course the digital divide, and I'm probably a little less optimistic in that sense than Mr. Thadani, simply because I've spent some time working in some remote areas. My prior roles before the foundation were largely in working with some of the most remote and distant people from connectivity. And so there I see the big challenges are, we have a digital divide based on geography. We have another one that's based on gender. We have one that's based on socioeconomic status. So these are, and they all sort of come together for a huge segment of the population in the worst times. And I think that's where we need a lot of innovation to actually bring people onto digital platforms. Once you're there, absolutely, you have access to the best of everything. But getting that access barrier breached will be very, very key. And I think BharatNet's work in that area is phenomenal. We're also seeing work in the private sector with Jio coming in. I think in 2017, I was part of a pilot that TRAI did around open Wi-Fi, which was also connecting in some ways to the panchayats and the CSCs. Along with BharatNet. So phenomenal work there. I think these are all great beginnings that have been made, but now we'll really need to start seeing, both the private sector as well as individuals and innovators come forward and start participating in actually making these initiatives come to fruition. And so there, the other challenge that we think we really need to address is this problem of silos and fragmentation in technology for development. We see, some of it is led by ideology, in the sense that people think this is the right way to do something, and therefore they've taken a different route from what's being done by somebody else. Or it could be simply because of lack of available information. But whatever the reasons are, we really need to start coming out of our silos, sharing our work more, collaborating more, because development ultimately is a space where we need collaboration and not so much competition. This is not an open market, free market kind of a model where capturing a market share gets you the value, and you grow as a company. Social entrepreneurship will necessarily need to look at collaboration as a way both to reduce costs as well as to drive efficiency and uptake. And then the last piece, that will actually enable this to go forward, is the standards piece, and I think that's where it ties back to that national open digital ecosystem conversation. We really need open public standards that everybody can use and leverage. And in closing, I'll just say that an organization or an organism cannot really become self-reliant or Atmanirbhar in parts. We must develop inclusively and coherently for a good, positive future for everyone. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. You stuck to your time, Arjun. Appreciate your doing that. And now I have the last person, last panelist. I want to give him his time as well. This is Mr. Vivek Prakash, Vice President and Head CSR of Jubilant Life Sciences. He's an Aspire Fellow and has been the Vice President CSR at Jubilant since May of 2006. So I would now like to like Mr. Prakash to please share his views. Again, if he can stick to the time, we will still have some time for questions. Thank you.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. Actually, my belief is that IT and digitalization should be considered as enabler. So this is not the actual. It is not doing actual delivery. It is enabling factor, and because there are fear among many people that IT and digitalization will reduce the job, but it should be considered as enabler, and actually it is delivering accuracy in the implementation and improve monitoring, quality improvement, real-time information. So I'm having some examples. So I want to first give those examples, one or two examples, and then how it is promoting social inclusion and how it is beneficial for the society and how we can address the challenges or nearby challenges which we are seeing. So we were so inter-country discussing how this new vaccine, if vaccination for COVID will come, how it will reach to the people. So I think after this example, especially the Mr. Nagar can replicate this and give this information to his group, and government can adopt this also. So this is so I'm giving one example. So being into CSR, so and part of the Jubilant Bhartiya Group, Jubilant is mainly into life sciences business, and innovation is core. So under CSR also, we believe that there should be some innovation, and we should try some new thing always, so that which can benefit to the society. So when we were so there are majorly 3 projects we are implementing: education, health, and livelihood. So under health, we created a telemedicine platform, and we believe that this platform has served this society even in the time of pandemic. But at the time, we have also established. So I think 3-4 years back we tried this model. So this is a geo-tagging model. So through which we are doing growth monitoring of each and every child, 0 to 5 years of child, and then pregnant mothers also. So that technology can be used now for this COVID vaccine. So how to reach out to them? So just like any Ola cab or Uber cab, you can see each and every household, each and every member of that household, and then you can so the district health authority, so CMO can visualize how many people have got this vaccine, how many are left out, and there is a provision of feeding their number and IVRS system also, so you can inform them that okay, so again next camp is so and so, you can go there and you can take. So these are some examples which can help this mission that the challenges we are seeing in the near future. On others, especially on livelihood, I would say again, agriculture is the core of this country. So if there will be no agriculture, there will be no we can't the actual sustainability of this country and of the society, because actually agriculture is giving employment to this country. And so our belief is that we should always try to improve or increase the productivity of the farmers and then increase their income also. So looking to that requirement, we came out with a provision of supporting farmers to create orchard and then fruit orchard in the farm, and then do some intercropping and market linkage. But at the same time, we also introduced a mobile application which is also having web application. So each and every farm is geotagged. Their soil card is being prepared. So soil is in fact, health is also being measured and captured. So you can see in which area of this particular town or state, where which kind of soil is there, what is the soil quality, what is the soil quality, and which kind of crop they can grow, or government can plant. So each and every data can support government and support society and support farmers also to improve their income and everything. Same way, and it's a two-way thing. So it's not only giving support to farmers, but it is giving support to traders and marketplace also to provide inputs get a source output from farmers. So it will become a marketplace so that this entire application will become self-sustainable. It's not dependent on anybody. So it will become self-sustainable. So we have to think, and it's a free for farmers, but the traders or the suppliers who will sell the product, buy the raw material from farmers, so they will pay the subscription fee. So entire system will become self-sustainable. So my belief is that, so taking this example, governments can, so state government or central government can adopt these examples in their mission, in their program, and do a bigger job, because the institution can become bigger than government. So ultimately, we have to support government. So we can't say that, okay, it's the government's responsibility. It's our responsibility also to do pilot and give it to government. So one example, I will another example, because Mr. Thadani has already explained about education. So we did one innovation. So we brought in a system just like private schools for the government schools, and we handed over to government now. So UP government has already adopted, and many other governments, many other organizations are also now trying to do similar work. So there are examples. So seeing benefits of this entire digitalization and social inclusion. The one example, the best example of government scheme is NFS, the National Food Security Scheme. The way they have digitalized this entire ration shop and delivering ration through this shop, utilizing that machine and this Aadhaar system and fingerprint system. So that has created impact. So now actual beneficiaries, there are some issues, but still we believe that it is creating a lot of impact. So at least pilferage has been reduced, and now actual beneficiaries are getting benefit of this scheme. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prakash, for again, you also stuck to your time. Thank you very much. I really appreciate. We have only a few minutes, but definitely can take a question in case Kavita or Kavita, do we have any questions?
Sir, I think like we discussed yesterday amongst the panelists, if there are any questions to each other, you may take some.
Well, we don't have time for some, so I'll just ask the panelists if they have a question from each other. Otherwise, I do have a question. I'll ask one question, but I'll request all panelists to answer that. But let me first wait if we have time enough for the questions. So there is one question which has been bothering me, and I will go ahead and say it. And those of you who would like to participate and answer that, it would be very, very, very useful. We are in the middle of the pandemic. And in the middle of the pandemic, right now, everybody's hope is that the bright light at the end of the tunnel, the name of that bright light is vaccine. And when the vaccine arrives, whenever it arrives, next 2 quarters or whenever, I think the challenge that we will have, and that is definitely an inclusion and availability issue, how will we make it reach to the furthest corners of the country? It's a digital challenge in addition to being a medical challenge, right? Now, each one of you organizations are very equipped. For example, the Gram Panchayat Bhavans of Mr. Nagar, would they have facilities? Is there a plan to build some facility and link some structures and the systems? Is Shinam's organization Dell building some solution which will allow a mass distribution and monitoring of vaccine? Is Arjun's organization, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who have healthcare as one of their focus areas, will they be able to contribute, or are they planning? And finally, Mr. Vivek Prakash, your organization, if you have any plans of rolling it out, since you are also so deeply involved. I'll just open it for everybody. Whoever would like to answer can answer. I'll start with Mr. Nagar.
Thank you very much, sir. The main ministry which are leading this effort is the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. They've got experts thinking about it because, like you said, it's a huge challenge, and everybody agrees with that. So what we'll do is that we are going to fall in line. Even so far, whatever communication has had to be sent to the panchayats. Initially, when we had the first round of lockdown, it was so severe, and so we were approached, and then we told that you need to have a new set of social norms. You need to write on the walls. You need to display it. The people should go around talking and making sure that hand washing and everything is concerned. So we are like a medium. So whatever information is going to come to us, we are going to try and we'll deploy our machinery to the fullest extent possible to see that it is enabled, and the Anganwadi workers, the A&M workers are sufficiently strengthened and supported by the Panchayat Raj. We have a Panchayat Secretary at the level of each Gram Panchayat. The SHG, self-help groups under the National Rural Livelihood Mission, they've been supporting this endeavor. So similarly, these people would aid and enable the A&M and the Anganwadi workers in the carrying out of their jobs. But aside from that, it's not like we had a plan of our own or something, sir.
No, but you have an amazing distribution system. I was completely bowled over by what you manage. You said it so nonchalantly, but having building a capacity building for 30 lakh people is not a joke. But anyway, my compliments on your efforts and all that you are doing. I'll ask Sheenam. Sheenam, does Dell have any plans?
So at this point of time, really no. But as you asked the question, and as talking about his own plans from a ministry perspective, I think we're very open, sir, to see if there is a partnership where we can do. I think this is a very real problem. It will align with our 2030 goals of the data decade also. Because in my opinion, we're clubbing the entire database that we've got, and we have to figure out what's the right ID and right kind of measure that you have to say, okay, have you reached everybody or not? I think this is a huge technology problem, and we love to be a partner.
Okay, thank you, Arjun.
Yeah, I think from the point of view of developing and providing upstream and research support, and that's a substantial work that's already ongoing. Idea we are also part of the COVAX work, working with the Serum Institute of India to actually bring out the vaccine quicker. And I think we're very much aligned with the goal of making sure it reaches the most vulnerable populations, both in India and globally. Exact mechanism and the means, I think we will have to take the government's lead on that, because as I mentioned earlier, in terms of silos and fragmentation, it's really not beneficial for us to be planning it independently. So we'll take the government's lead, and we're obviously there to support any efforts of that kind.
And Mr. Vivek Prakash.
So I have one submission on this. So there is no need of innovation. There is existing system, because if we are going for it, it will take 6 months. It will take 1 year. So it's better to be with the existing system. So there is a system of ASA worker in this country. They are serving and covering 1,000 population. So under NRHM also, and now this is Urban Health also has covered under this program. So now this is National Health Mission. So if we enable all these ASA workers through the app which we are having, there's only one mobile set is required. It can work in offline condition also, and just customization of our existing application which we have. So and we would be happy to share our knowledge, experience, and do a pilot within 1 or 3 months, next 3 months, so that whenever there will be availability of vaccine, we can immediately reach out to the community, and within a fraction of you can say in few months we can reach out to Sintas. So I think there is chances, and so it's a good thing that we had invested in the last 4 years, but now that application can help to this country during this period. So there is only requirement of few customization, and because we have developed 2 systems, so we will integrate both the system, the health and agri both, because in agri we are covering entire family, so we are capturing details of family also. In health we are only covering the child, so we will integrate both. There will be a small system, but a very good system for delivering this project. But again, after this this completion of this mission of reaching out for the vaccine, I think this set of data will help government to implement many other programs also, and monitoring of like polio and other programs also. So I think we would be happy to partner if any. And we are trying also. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Vivek Prakash, for your enthusiasm and readiness. I do want to thank all the panelists for making their time available. We exceeded by 4 minutes, which is not a bad track record for the fact that we also started a few minutes late. But I do want to thank each of the panelists. I wish we had more time. That is always the question in any panel. But I think each one of the presentations was extremely engaging. Your enthusiasm and energy and commitment to social inclusion and upliftment of society using digital technologies, I think live examples, they're very, very encouraging. I do hope that we'll find a way of working together under the aegis of Center for Digital Transformation. CDT is committed to making digital India happen for real. Like Shinam said, we want to see digital India happen for real. So with these words, I thank you all, and I will be in touch with you individually as well. So with that, I hand you back to Kavita or Suhail.
Vijay, you did an awesome job. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, all the panelists.
Yes, and thank you for having us. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. The next session will begin at 2:30. I would request the delegates to join back around 2:25. The session is on infrastructure requirements for a digital workplace. Thank you.